Hi, everyone, and welcome to your second lecture for our fourth week in technical writing. This lecture is going to cover what I've termed authentic authorship. This lecture is a very, very small part of what came out of a grant I was given in 2018 for some entrepreneurial work I did at Villanova University. Um, Basically, the seminar that I decided to develop with that grant money was one geared towards business executives in order to reflect on their own lives and who they are and think about what kind of writing lessons we can distill from that. And so this is a very small version of that. And I'm going to ask you to do a corresponding exercise on Canvas. I had thought about changing this out in our syllabus for maybe something else, something a little more technical. But I've been given really good feedback on the reflections on the assignments that have let you kind of work with yourself as an expert. And so I'm going to stick with it. What I'll do is I'll add in some technical lessons to the assignment sheet for this one. I'll have you work with executive summaries and subheadings as well. So I'll add in the technical stuff on Canvas for you to kind of learn at your own pace. But this will be another assignment that'll get you that'll let you get to work with kind of yourself as an expert and your own perspectives on things. And it ties really nicely into the first lecture from this week, which was about ethics. So let me share my screen so you can see the PowerPoint. If you remember from earlier in the course, we had this question of understanding your audience. This one flips the question around a little bit and asks you to think about understanding yourself as a big part of starting to understand the audience. Like I said, the authentic authorship workshop that I gave was more of a seminar for business executives, and the big writing assignment that was tied to it was I asked the executives to tell their life story in 3 parts, and I asked them to tell 3 different life stories. And so they were asked to tell their private life story, their personal life story, and their business life story, each in 3 parts. And the only kind of background that I gave for them was that there was different types of authenticity to think about. The first is traditional authenticity, which is essentially that you could maybe sit down, list your attributes, list who you are, and that's your authentic self, that it's kind of intrinsic to all of us and we know what it is. There's romantic authenticity. You can think of like romantic poets looking for themselves out in the world, or you can think of kind of like eat, pray, love, where, yeah, there's this idea that yourself is out there in the world somewhere. You've just got to find it. And then lastly, there's existentialist authenticity, which is kind of the go with the flow kind of authenticity, like how I show up each day, even though that'll change from day to day. That's who I am. And so that's the only real background they were given before writing these stories. There's a lot more research to it, but I'm not going to get deep into that in these lectures because I like to keep them short for you all so that the learning can happen more on Canvas. But from the stories that they developed and from the seminar we held together, talking through some of the stories and talking about who we are ourselves, especially as writers and authors, we distilled 4 lessons, and these were the lessons we discovered. So we decided that authentic authors develop stories and anticipate counter stories. And so I'm going to ask you to do the first one of these on Canvas to kind of develop a story for your time here at University of Delaware. But the other thing we added to that was anticipate counter stories. So for every dominant story we tell about ourselves, there are probably 100 different ways that other people look at us and tell different kind of stories. And this goes for other parts of the world as well, because counter stories in rhetoric is used to talk about how marginalized voices see dominant narratives as well. So that was our first bullet point. Our second one, we decided that authentic authors observe and acknowledge the rhythms of their lives. And so if we're looking back over at the existentialist type of authenticity, you're thinking about how from day to day, from year to year. Maybe who you are, what you would say is your authenticity changes, and that's okay, as long as you're observing and acknowledging that, and not trying to stick to just one story. This also goes back to I asked you about writing how to enjoy your favorite song as an instruction manual. And I'm sure your favorite song might change by next week. It might have changed already from when you wrote the assignment. And so that was part of this same idea. Next, we said that authentic authors center choice and reflection in their decision making. And so we decided that authors who really have a strong authenticity focus don't just wander unconsciously into decisions, especially writing decisions. That every email, every comma, every word choice is the comes from the process of actual conscious decision making, and then you also give your time to reflect on the same thing, reflect on those emails, reflect on the word choices, and give ourselves space to do that. And then lastly, as we kind of moved out of the exercise, we said authentic authors embody their stories, decisions, and reflections in all that they do. And so the authentic author doesn't sit down and use these first 3 bullet points only when they're writing and totally forget about it. But when we walk away from our writing as well, that we continue to embody that in our lives. And so that was kind of the output of the seminar in just 7 bullet points, or 8 bullet points. How many do I have here? Sorry, 7 bullet points down here, and then 2 more. But yeah, this was sort of the outcome of that seminar, and it was a really good experience. And since you all have been reflecting positively on working with yourselves as experts, I think this will lend itself really well to what we want to do in our course. There was one small complication that we couldn't quite work out, and it came from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This was a really popular book. It was rooted in behavioral economics, but it still, I think, became kind of like a bestseller and a book people were talking about for a little while. I forget how old it is now. But from Kahneman's studies in behavioral economics, he concluded this, or sort of maybe kicked off the book with this, we would say. But he said, we know far less about ourselves than we feel we do. And so what we drew out from that, and what we got talking about in the seminar, was that it's really difficult to generalize this authentic authorship thing, because even though we can tell our own life stories and reflect on those and center choice in what we do, it's really hard to say that we could do the same for all the other parts of the rhetorical situation, which I hope you remember from the earlier lecture as well. That it's very hard to tell different stories about a receiver, especially if the only contact you're going to have with them is through a piece of technical writing. It'd be hard to say you know much about their life story or their authentic self. We're really just kind of taking a guess at it in our technical writing. There are ways we can understand our message a little bit better, maybe if we really focus on individual words and what they could mean and possibly mean to different kinds of audiences. We can maybe pick out some of the lessons embedded in those, but we can never really understand how much one word will mean to another person in different kind of contexts. The channel we never know much about. I'm publishing these on YouTube, but really I don't know how they fit into YouTube's structure, what they do with videos, how this all works. I really don't know much about the channel, and we can usually say that about our own technical writing as well. The environment as well. How much do we really know about where we physically are, and how important is that? Does the history of a classroom or the history of a boardroom change how we interact in it? It's hard to say. And how much do we really know about our context? How much can we really research and figure out before we can make a decision? But are we always kind of just taking a guess at it? And so these are some of the complications that came out of the workshop. Yeah, some of the ideas that we generated. So I'll ask you to do an authentic authorship exercise. I'm not going to ask you to tell all your different life stories in 3 ways, but I'll develop one for you all. And yeah, like I said, I'll embed some more technical stuff for you to think about and reflect on in that assignment sheet. So while I didn't lecture on it, I'll provide materials for you. So again, yeah, just trying to build out what we've liked so far in the reflection, which is kind of working with ourselves and ourselves as experts. And then also adding in a lot of the technical writing techniques and methods. So look out for that on the assignment sheet. And yeah, thanks for listening.